The Ireland-United States Alumni Association promotes the US-Ireland relations and develops the next generation in the US-Ireland relationship. It is a network of alumni of US State Departments, including the IVLP, Boston College, Fulbright, Washington Ireland and J1 Visa. I took part in the International Visitor Leadership Programme, Women in Politics and Social Sectors, and to this day the 17 women from across the world and our group leaders are still in contact.
I participated in the US State Department Boston College program for social enterprise and overcoming long-term unemployment. We met leaders from Boston and Detroit, tackling issues that we were tackling here in Ireland, and to this day we are still learning from our American colleagues. The IUSA is an incredible diverse group of people. I have met poets and politicians, educators and musicians, business leaders, and anyone who wants to make a positive contribution to US-Ireland relations.
The US-Irish relationship means a lot to me since I've been on the programme. Felt like a local in America, knowing so much about their history, how the Congress work, how environmental issues work there too, and being a student in their own college. A part of the CUSE programme was to feel like a local in America. So we didn't only go to America to just be a student, learn about environmental issues. A part of it was to go to American families, stay there for a day, see how it is.
The US-Irish relationship is important because there really is a special bond between our two nations that goes beyond politics, economics and culture. When people come back from US State Department trips, it is really important that they get together with other alumni to share their experiences and to reconnect with the Irish-American community.
The US-Irish relationship is not only important for Ireland, it is also important for Europe as we face whatever challenges lie ahead in the 21st century. The US State Department has been running exchange programs for over 8 decades. We'd love you to join our Alumni Association to connect and network, both physically and virtually with us, and build a long-lasting community. Good evening and welcome to the IUSA Annual Conference. This is our 10th conference and our first time that we're holding it virtually. Biden, Brexit and New Beginnings is the chosen heading for this year's conference, and we're delighted to have you tuning in with us from right across the world. Please join us on Twitter at Irish US Alumni, and our handle for this year's conference is #IUSACON21. We'd be delighted if you could join the conversation online. During tonight's conference, I'm going to be joined by 2 American guest speakers, one joining me from Washington DC and one joining me from Boston. Then we're going to go to our annual Alumni Awards presentation that was recorded earlier by the US Embassy's Charge d'Affaires, Alexandra McKnight. I really hope you enjoy the conference. Dr. Lara Brown joins me from Washington DC, where she serves as an associate professor and the director of the Graduate School of Political Management at George Washington University. Lara is a distinguished author, including her most recent Amateur Hour, Presidential Character and the Question of Leadership. Dr. Brown has written op-eds and blogs for the New York Times, the Washington Post, Politico and The Hill, to name but a few. Joanna is a former op-ed columnist, political reporter and TV critic for the Boston Globe. She has appeared as a commentator on CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, NPR and Monocle 24. I'd like you to welcome our 2 guest speakers. Lara, Joanna, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you both this evening?
Very well, thank you. It's delightful to be here.
Doing great. Yes, thank you so much for having both of us.
Not at all, and you're really welcome to our first ever virtual conference, and we're in our 10th year, so we're joined by lots of people across the world, keeping an eye on the Ireland-United States relationship. So tonight, as you're aware, our heading is Biden, Brexit and New Beginnings. And with that, I'm going to get straight in, and I'm going to direct this to you, Lara, at first. So seldom before in the history of US presidents has the first 100 days been so important. What does President Joe Biden need to do in that vital period to rebuild America's place in the world?
Well, the first thing he has to do is really rebuild some of the trust that exists within the United States. And I think that you can see that the Biden administration is already launching into this with respect to the coronavirus pandemic. They have taken a series of actions to ensure that the states have more support to leverage the federal government's resources to roll out the vaccine and also to increase testing. I mean, I will just say that it has been extraordinary to me that as a country, we have never really done enough testing to have a sense of the prevalence of the virus in the population. I mean, as a scientist, you just can't do anything without understanding the challenge you're facing. And we have now had over a year of this situation where we're still trying to understand our actual challenge.
Joanna, and Lara, it's to be 12 months into something, it is a little bit challenging to see where you need to go. Joanna, what do you think?
I agree that the first thing that Joe Biden has to do to restore everyone's confidence is to get a handle on the coronavirus and this next phase, which is the vaccine distribution. The Trump administration did an excellent job, I think, in getting the vaccine up to market with great haste through the research process. But the vaccine rollout has been an incredible challenge. And I think he needs to gain a lot of confidence by putting scientists and logistics experts together to bring the vaccine to the population. There are so many domestic issues on Joe Biden's agenda, many of them stemming from the pandemic, particularly the economic recession and downturn in the country that stems directly from the pandemic, but also issues of systemic racism that the past year in this country showed us that we need to address. And that's in addition to his priorities that he stated of getting back onto the international scene, rejoining the Paris Climate Accords, rejoining the World Health Organization, establishing, again, a world partnership as opposed to a more America First mentality. But I do think he needs to get his domestic agenda straight before he can earn the capital to move really further onto the international stage.
And Joanna, on that, what role will Kamala Harris play as the first female vice president? I think it's going to be an incredible busy 100 days. So how do you see her and her role playing out?
It's been really interesting. I've been looking back at Joe Biden's role when he was vice president to Barack Obama. And although they came from very different places politically, they eventually forged a really interesting partnership. And Joe Biden brought to the table things that Barack Obama didn't have, which mainly a vast experience with Congress and with negotiation and with that kind of Washington wheeling and dealing. Joe Biden obviously has that as president. So what Kamala Harris brings to the table is, first of all, just competence and a symbolic importance. She's a bridge to a lot of communities that are looking to the administration for change and progress and action. And so I think that she will probably, I expect that Joe Biden will give her some particular areas to focus on, just as he got when he was vice president, and that we'll see her taking on some pieces of the policy agenda and owning them a little bit, which will raise her profile as well.
Excellent. I think there's no more capable person from what we've seen already, so it'll be interesting to watch it unfold. Lara, what do you think about Kamala's role in the next 100 days and, well, over the next 4 years, really?
Well, I agree that Vice President Harris is likely to gain a very prominent role in domestic policy. I would anticipate, given her background in as a prosecutor in California, her being very involved in looking at restructuring criminal justice and looking at police reform. We have issues in this country that have long been sidelined since really the Bush administration. And I think, President Biden made this clear in some of his early debates that a big part of the initial efforts to ramp up policing in the United States included ideas of community policing, which meant bringing officers and having them live in the communities in which they police so that they themselves could build trust with those individuals. And what we saw really over the last 2 decades was a gutting of those programs. And now we have this kind of massive divide between the police and the communities who are there and those police who are there to protect them. And I think what we're going to see is a renewed effort in looking at ways to forge more trust, provide more assistance to the police forces themselves so that they are not engaged in some of the psychological or social work that they are often pulled into. And I think we're going to see it really a rethinking of our criminal justice system from top to bottom.
I would add that if that is a piece of the policy agenda that Vice President Harris gets, she's in a really interesting position to head that up. She has a background as a prosecutor. She was district attorney in San Francisco and then attorney general of the state of California. So she has, I think, some credibility within the criminal justice community and within the courts to really to understand the issues and to be able to kind of get on the inside and make some change from within, which politically in this country I think could be very helpful.
I think what's important about Vice President Harris's background is that she did negotiate with the banks, and she can be somebody, as the administration looks to build back better, find ways to ensure that there is more equity in the economic recovery, and to be able to push back on some of the finance pressure that will come around foreclosing on homes and mortgages and on those people who have lost so much in this economic downturn.
And she'll be a great support to them. I think they'll complement each other well. And Joanna, as you were saying earlier, in terms of Biden, getting assignments from Obama, very specific, he was very strong in foreign relations. Looking at that, and in terms of the coronavirus, we all know that there was a lot of different approaches right across the world from a lot of different leaders. What do you think Biden needs to do in terms of rebuilding connections with world leaders when travel isn't available to him? Because he was quite good when he was dispatched by Obama, right across the world at different intervals. How do you think he'll tackle that now by rebuilding and connecting with people when he can't physically be with them?
Well, he'll probably be doing some Zoom calls, as the rest of us have been. But we really are, in all seriousness, at a pivot point in U.S. foreign relations. We're coming from an America First strategy that the previous administration had, and kind of a defensive posture and skeptical posture toward a lot of international agreements and arrangements, to someone who, as you said, has a long history of working in diplomacy channels and working with leaders from other governments. Originally, President Biden thought that he would be up for Secretary of State in the Obama administration. So he's always had that posture. I think, again, rejoining organizations like the World Health Organization will really help put the U.S. in a position both symbolically and logistically to work on issues of the pandemic. And I think it's going to be really important to bring the vaccine not only across the United States, but across the world, to facilitate the transfer of vaccines wherever they're developed, to particularly parts of the world that don't have the infrastructure, don't maybe have the scientific infrastructure, and really get it to be a global solution as opposed to just a nation by nation solution.
And I think that brings me back to your point earlier, Lara, about we're not even 100% sure of the challenges. So he's got an awful lot of work in, domestically, and then, Joanna, as you said, to roll it across, and take kind of that global leadership role that might have been vacant for quite a while. Lara, what do you think about his rebuilding of, relationships?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is really take stock of where the United States has been for the last couple decades. In some ways, since 9/11, the United States has really pushed many more unilateral actions forward than multilateral engagement. You have seen time and again, whether it's been at the United Nations or in these other multilateral organizations, that the United States has sought to either kind of lead or dominate those. But now I think what is interesting is that with President Trump's stance of having removed the United States from so much of that engagement, the world has in some ways moved on without us. And coming back to those organizations is going to be a delicate balance. I tend to think that some of our longtime allies are going to see us more now, if you will, as siblings rather than parents. And we are not going to have, in some ways, kind of the moral authority that we have carried for decades in having originally established those organizations. So I think the challenge is great. I do believe President Biden is up to it in that he is somebody who has spent much of his life caring about our status and our relationships around the world. But I don't think that it is a small task that is before him.
And I think, as we alluded to, he's got an awful lot, to look after domestically. But I've no doubt that he's been on the phone and on Zoom since November, rebuilding, connecting. And we all are aware of Biden's charm and charisma. So I think, there'll be a lot of movement in spring, summer, but I think it'll be back on that road. But it's a very valid point that, and where you're coming from, that you feel more like siblings than, the parental role. Looking to a role that's closer to home for Ireland here and the whole for the United Kingdom exiting Brexit. So it's happened. It's affected us economically, socially, politically, culturally. And, in effect, our main trading partner has left the European Union. And I'm just wondering, from an American perspective, what hope is there for any country establishing relations with small economies? And I'll direct that to you, Joanna, if that's okay.
Sure. It's been very interesting to watch Brexit from the perspective of the United States. In part, I think there was almost, I hate to say it, a sense of relief that there are other countries that are going through these kind of a little bit of turmoil, these questions about internal versus external, these populist movements that drive policy, and to see that this is a struggle that's happening across Europe and in other parts of the world, in addition to just here in the United States for the last 8 years, has been not heartening, but it makes us feel part of the world. It's going to be very interesting to see. The United States and the UK have such a continued special relationship that I think there is also just particular interest in what is happening with Brexit and with the UK, and how that might affect not only on a micro level people's travel, business arrangements, relationships, but also, as Lara alluded to earlier, our place and our relationship on the world stage. Britain and the US sometimes led some of those partnerships historically together and came together as a united front in efforts to keep the peace in different parts of the world, to really step in at important moments. And so whether Britain kind of maintains a more internal posture, or like the US starts to look out more toward partnerships even outside of the EU, will be a really interesting thing to see in the next couple of years.
I nearly would have preferred watching from America rather than being, in the turmoil and watching it unfold and wondering what implications. Lara, what do you think about the role that's kind of rolling out at the moment? Because there's an awful lot of decisions still to be worked out.
Well, President Biden is also an Irish American, and he has great affinity for Ireland, and he is well versed in the Good Friday agreements and the understanding that there should be really a soft border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. And this will all play in to how sort of Brexit plays out. I think in some ways there is good news in that many people in the UK are finding some of these borders in terms of trade to be more difficult than they imagined, even though they negotiated kind of a soft exit at the end of the year. And I think that will allow the United States to continue to push for a kind of reunion of Ireland, in the sense that there needs to be that soft border. And in kind of a going forward relationship with Ireland and the UK. It's a it's a long process, but I think that there is a way in which the United States will see Ireland as a partner on the world stage, maybe even in some ways more important than a UK initially.
I think for two media and political experts, you're going to have a very interesting 12 months ahead. You won't be, looking for time off much, with lots of things to write both sides of the Atlantic. And just to bring it closer to home again, and we're so proud of how often, pre-election that Biden has referenced Ireland, and, his cousins are in Mayo. And I know that neither of you have been to Ireland yet. I'm hoping for, a reunion with everyone here in time to come. And we're only too sorry that we couldn't meet you physically. We usually have a lovely event every January, and lovely, food and company and networking. But I'd just love to know, what are the things that we can be hopeful for?
I would say that I imagine we're going to have increased trade and engagement. I mean, the US Ireland relationship is very close. We are important trading partners to each other. And I envision that in a Biden administration, that will continue. Certainly, the Irish cultural exports are as important to the United States as anything else, in that so many people in the United States have an affinity, even if they don't have direct ancestry, to Ireland. And so I would imagine that we will see more and more people sort of celebrating Kelly Green.
I love that. Joanna?
Yeah, I agree. I'm in Boston right now. Boston has a huge connection to Ireland. I know so many people who are either recent Irish immigrants or have ancestry in Ireland who go back to visit their families, who share the beautiful photos of the gorgeous landscapes and who tell the wonderful stories. So I know I'm personally looking forward to really doing what you said. I mean, I would love to get to Ireland and not just see the scenery, but I'd love to get to a pub. I want to sit down with locals and talk over a Guinness and get to know everybody. And I think everyone is craving that so badly. Everyone's really looking forward to that moment when we can travel again. And I think you're going to see such a huge appetite for reforming those personal connections and doing that physical connection making that we have been craving for so many months. And I agree with Lara. I think Ireland is going to play a huge role in bringing us back together, because that's what you people do.
And I think all of our suitcases are definitely dusty at the moment. And like you said, I think people are going to be so happy for that physical interaction, that human connection. It's great to have virtual and Zoom, and, everyone is really, adapting to technology and grabbing it with both hands. But thank you. We look forward to that. And, we've extended an invite to both of you. Both Chris and I and all the IUSA board members are happy to give you a tour of anywhere in Ireland. I'm from Tipperary, but I'm in Dublin, and Chris will cover Louth, but we have board members right across Ireland. So I'm just wondering, yeah.
Okay, can I just add one other thing? It was also the case that in President Trump's sort of departing remarks, he said that it was going to be very important for Biden to have luck. Well, let's hope that he does have the luck of the Irish with him.
I love that.
And that there is some way in which he can approach, these tremendous challenges with the kind of perseverance and tenacity. And in some ways, I think accepting optimism that exists among the Irish people. There is a way in which his faith and his Irish heritage informs who he is as a person. And I think much of that was on display at the inauguration, and his remarks about the importance of unity and bringing down the temperature so that we can increase the conversation. All of that feels as much Irish as it does American.
Oh, I love that. And I've heard so much about how his mum brought him up on a lot of Irish values. and even his charm and his charisma. And we're just so proud that he will often recite numerous poets from right across the island of Ireland. And it would be so pivotal if our Taoiseach was able to travel, if it was safe to do so, for St. Patrick's Day. I think that would be just so momentous for both countries. And our Taoiseach here, who is the Deputy Prime Minister, is known for his socks. So I'm sure we can send over some lucky Irish socks just to make sure that he's got all the luck he needs for his 4 years. So after discussing Brexit, COVID, the powerful Vice President Kamala Harris, the next 100 days, is there something that we're not looking at? Joanna, I'll go to you first on that.
The only thing I'll say, as we embark on a page-turning moment for the United States, is that I do feel a sense of optimism. I feel a sense that, first of all, in terms of the pandemic, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. There's much work to be done, but a sense that there is a future where, as we just said, we will be able to come together physically and share in all of that again. And there's a sense that in that temperature, that there's an appetite for that temperature lowering from all corners, that the last 4 years, wherever you stood politically, were exhausting, and strained ties between, among family members, among friends, as well as among nations. And that there's a sense that everyone's ready to change and ready to, if not see eye to eye, because that will never happen, to at least recognize where each other comes from and be on a calmer, more human posture.
I love that. And just on the change, from watching TV screens and Twitter and whatever updates we can get, the Biden administration appears to be ones that they're going around with their sleeves rolled up and they're ready to work. They're ready. And that's so empowering to everybody right across the world, that if you want to make change, it starts with you. You grab a team and you go together, and anyone, we can all make change. And I think, no matter where you were politically or across the world, it's been a very hard 12 months, never mind 4 years. So I think people are ready just to start looking after themselves and make simple changes, to redirect their path. Lara, is there anything that you feel that we're not looking at?
Well, I think the most important thing is actually really a more domestic question, and it's going to be a question for our politicians in Washington. And that is, are they ready to leave behind what has been essentially parliamentary behavior and re-embrace our institution's background of separation of powers, which means that you pride your institutional position rather than your partisan position. And why this is important is that it appears that in some ways, each party is ready to go at each other procedurally from a power perspective. That we see, Mitch McConnell, the Senate minority leader, already ready to kind of dig his heels in on a series of issues. And you see the Democrats saying Republicans are not willing to work with us. But if we immediately go back to that kind of reflexive partisan tribalism, then quite frankly, those in Washington will have learned nothing from the Trump era, because it was precisely that kind of gridlock and really stalemate that brought forward a President Trump's rhetoric that said Washington is broken and it's rigged and we need to rip it all apart. So I think that one of the things we have to be on the lookout for the next year is really whether or not partisans are willing to do what they say they want to do, which is to start working in a bipartisan fashion, start building their coalitions from the center out, and start moving away from this idea of essentially parliamentary operating structures.
So that's all then they have to do. It seems like they have quite a lot of work, but it'll be very interesting to watch it unfold over the coming weeks and months. And just as we come to the end of this interview, I just Wanted to check, Joanna, if there's anything that you'd like to leave us with and thank you for joining us from Boston. And we were delighted to have you with us tonight. But we'll just come to some closing remarks for our first ever virtual conference. And I'll go to you in Boston, Joanna.
Sure, just a lot of gratitude for having me and inviting me to be part of this really interesting conversation at a really important and interesting moment. I very much look forward to the time that we can meet up in person and have a pint of stout and really enjoy each other's company the way it should be. And I wish you the best of luck in your conference.
Thank you. And you have all our details. So please do, look us up. Will you just drop us an email and we'll be there. We'll collect you. I haven't been to the airport in about 10 months, but we'll swing by. Lara, any closing remarks? And thank you for joining us from Washington, DC.
Thank you so much for having me. I concur completely. I am a big fan of Guinness beer, and in fact, it is the only beer that I drink. So that stout is very close to my heart. And I'm very much looking forward to coming to Ireland and having an opportunity to have a freshly drawn Guinness from one of your pubs and rejoicing at the beauty that exists there.
Thank you both so much for joining us at the IUSA 10th Annual Conference. Talk to you soon. Thank you to Lara and Joanna, our two guest speakers, for a great conversation and discussion on Biden, Brexit and new beginnings. I'm now going to hand over to our Vice President, Chris Gordon, for the award ceremony that was recorded earlier today. Over to you, Chris.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here for the IUSA Alumni Awards. My name is Chris Gordon. I am the Vice President of the IUSA and delighted to welcome some awardees here today. And the Charge d'Affaires for the US Embassy here in Dublin, Alexandra McKnight. We are about to award our winners. There has been fierce competition, as there is every year. And so to announce those awards, I will pass it over to the Charge d'Affaires, Alexandra McKnight. Just by a brief introduction, Alexandra McKnight assumed her duties as Charge d'Affaires interim at the US Embassy in Dublin on the 19th of January in 2021, after the departure of our former ambassador, Edward F. Crawford. Alexandra has also served in Mexico, Rome, Spain, Portugal, Malta, Colombia, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, etc., etc. We are delighted that she could join us this evening to present this year's IUSA Awards. Hopefully Ireland will become your most favourite placing, Alexandra. We're delighted to have you here and presenting the awards. Alexandra, I will leave it to you.
Good evening. I'm delighted to join you this evening for the IUSA Annual Conference and Awards presentation. Thank you, Chris, Kate, and the board for this invitation. I'm extremely proud of our global network of exchange program alumni, and I'm continually impressed by their work. Today, I'm here to honor two alumni for their remarkable achievements in their professional life and for their continued commitment to promoting the US-Irish relationship. So without further ado, I'd like to present this year's IUSA Emerging Leader Award to Ian Power. Ian is the CEO of Community Creations, a not-for-profit company behind the youth information platform spunout.ie and the new free text service, which provides immediate support for people affected by mental health issues. Ian is also involved with the Citizens Information Board, the Community Foundation for Ireland, and is currently helping to build Ireland's national mental health policy. Since Ian participated in the Boston College Exchange Program in 2014, his work has grown in necessity and relevance, and his commitment to making Ireland a better place for young people to grow up in is commendable. For his achievements, I present Ian with the IUSA Emerging Leader Award. Congratulations, Ian.
Thank you so much, Alexandra and Chris. Firstly, I just want to say I'm very grateful to the IUSA for this honor, and indeed to the US Embassy in Dublin for the opportunity afforded to me to participate in the State Department Professional Fellows Program back in 2014. Our program at Boston College allowed us the opportunity to explore the theme of youth justice. And during that time, I had an opportunity to take up a placement with ROCA in Boston. And ROCA is a relentless force in disrupting incarceration, poverty, and racism across the US. And by engaging in relentless service and outreach to young people that the rest of society has left behind, they recognize the good and value in every single person, the essence of empathy and humanity. And my experience in Roca is one I brought home to Ireland. We established a two-way knowledge transfer between Ireland and Boston. And to this day, we continue to advocate for the extension of a welfare-centred, trauma-informed youth justice system from 18 up to 25 years here in Ireland to recognise young people's evolving capacities. Our work in Spun8.ie understands young people come to us from all different kinds of experiences. A lot of our work centres on providing mental health resources and to support to young people across Ireland. And last year alone, our texting service engaged over 33,000 texters from across Ireland in moments of crisis. One of the privileges of working with young people in Ireland is witnessing their pursuit of empathy and justice for all. And I think we've made so much progress here in Ireland in the last number of years across a whole range of social issues. But I think one of the messages I wanted to impart today is that we must not allow ourselves to become complacent. The time for leadership of young people is always now. There is still so much work to be done in areas of climate action, gender equality, and racial equity. And I think it feels appropriate to quote Martin Luther King a couple of weeks after the world remembered his legacy once again. He said, "Life's most pertinent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" And I think it's a question worth asking ourselves each and every day. So thank you again, most humbly, for this honour. I will use this to fuel my work both now and into the future. And I'm delighted to be here this evening with you all. So take care.
Thank you, Ian. The next award tonight is the IUSA Distinguished Alumni Award, an award that celebrates the lifetime's work of its recipient. And I am delighted to present this award to Professor William Revel. Since attending Iowa State University as a Fulbright Scholar in 1973, William's contribution to science has been tremendous. Through his work at University College Cork, William has been involved in multiple societies, all helping to expand our knowledge in the field of biochemistry. William has also made significant contributions to public discourse around science in Ireland through his weekly science column in the Irish Times. Throughout William's career, he has also worked to strengthen US-Irish relations, serving on the executive committee and as president of the Irish Fulbright Alumni Association. So William, let me now present you with the IUSA Distinguished Alumni Award. Congratulations, William.
Well, thank you very much, Alex, for that. And my congratulations to Ian on receiving the Emerging Leader Alumni Award. Now, for my own part, I'm deeply honored to receive this 2021 Distinguished Leader Alumni Award. My experience in America for 3 years in the 1970s as a Fulbright Scholar was amazingly enriching for me. I learned a lot about how to do high-level biochemical research there, but I also got an insight into American life and American culture that you can only get by living in a country for a number of years. The experience that I gained in America has stood me in very good stead throughout my career. It still informs some of my attitudes that I adopt in my public writings. So thank you very much for this honor.
Thank you, William. Thank you both to William and to Ian. And Chris, back to you.
And thank you so much, Alexandra. Distinct thank you to our awardees this year for accepting the award. I do have one last thing that I would like, if you wouldn't mind. I believe you have your awards magically beside you. We weren't able to be in person, but we were able to make sure that you had the awards. Would you do us a favor? Could you just present us with the awards as if we were there presenting it to you? That would be amazing. Could you please show? This is my favorite picture. I am delighted to you both. Thank you so much for being a part of our awards ceremony, and we're looking forward to seeing you in person in future Irish US Alumni Network sessions. Thank you very much to Alexandra, to William, and to Ian. Back to Kate.
Thank you, Chris. And that brings the 10th annual IUSA conference to a close. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have taken part in a US State Department programme, we'd love if you could join the association. Log on to irishusalumni.com and join tonight. Good night, God bless, and safe home.